I just feel like there is this innate idea in this man that he wants to challenge nature here.
He can like look at these perspectives of looking at the world as like construct. Because he broke out of one construct, he can look at the other things and see, okay, here is also a construct. And he's saying to think that death is inevitable and that value in death is in itself a construct.
I want to say it's a very like narcissistic endeavor.
How do you feel this personal endeavor compares to Jeff Bezos' personal endeavor of going to space? What do you think has more value to humanity?
His life doesn't seem to be about living. If all he's trying to do is just to survive, he's not doing what we consider living, like new experiences, so doing something that we wouldn't do. We take chances every day, right? Like you could get hit by a car while crossing the street, could just happen.
Okay, I gotta respond to that because I do very much disagree with that. Because he lives more than any of us do, realistically speaking. He travels, he does conferences, he lives a lot more than us. This is a show where we review documentaries. With me today is Hamad,
Hello.
Natalia,
Hi.
and Soham.
Hello.
So today we are reviewing this documentary called Don't Die by Chris Smith. It's about this insane dude called Bryan Johnson. Bryan Johnson is an ex-entrepreneur who created this company called Braintree Venmo, which powers a lot of payment systems on the internet. He exited that company, became a venture capitalist, and is now on this journey to live forever. Hence the name Don't Die. Natalia will give us a summary of the documentary and then we'll move on to discussing it.
Okay, so yeah, like Shantanu said, the documentary covers Brian Johnson's journey from tech guy to being multimillionaire to what he is most famous for now, which is trying to live for as long as physically possible and for pioneering the Don't Die community. So the documentary covers significant amount of his life. It documents his early life, his childhood within the Mormon community, his marriage and subsequent divorce, and it provides reasons as to why he does what he does. It explores his philosophy and why he tries so hard and spends millions of dollars a year to extend his lifespan.
All right, thanks, Nas. That was pretty good summary. We are doing this episode a little differently. Instead of preparing talking points in advance, we're just going to do a discussion about it. Because turns out we have a lot of disagreements about this documentary, and we thought discussion slash debate would be a much better way to figure out our opinions on this documentary rather than just talk about it. Let's first start with the basic idea behind this, which is the don't die philosophy that Brian Johnson proposes. Let me just summarize the basic idea and then all of you can respond. So, at one point, Brian Johnson sells his company and he has a lot of money and nothing to do. So, what does he do? He's trying to figure it out. And he does this thought experiment where he's like, okay, think about the 17th century. What is the most important thing that came out of the 17th century? And you will probably come up with like one or two things maximum. Think about the 18th century as a whole. You will come up with one or two things as a maximum. So now let's extrapolate this and let's think about people in the 25th century or 28th century. What will they think about our century? What is the most important thing that happened in our century? And he thought about this a lot and he came up with two answers. One is AI, and the other one is don't die. His basic philosophy is that AI is getting really good. At one point, we'll reach this intelligence explosion period where like AI will figure out a lot of things, and how humanity works as a whole will completely change. He calls it zeroth principle thinking, where you don't even start with first principles, you start with no principles and you imagine what will happen, because you need to go to zeroth principle to imagine what happens in an AI world where intelligence, if we have greater intelligence than humans, because what will they do? How the fuck will humans figure that out? Because they're smarter than humans, so humans can't figure that out. So, what can we do? All we can do is not die till this happens, because the future is probably better than the past and most of our problems will be solved in the future. That's like what his position is. So all we need to do is survive till the AI kind of just solves most of our problems. And that's why his philosophy is don't die, just don't die. In chasing don't die, he comes up with like a bunch of methods to do it, which we'll discuss later. I just want your guys' opinions on what you think about this entire backstory of how he came to don't die and this idea of chasing immortality. Hamad can start first.
I think in his thinking process, he's come across a very good idea what what happened in the 14th century, what happened in the 15th century. And I think it would be fair to say that all of us live much better lives than, say, Emperor Akbar, who at one point ruled this peninsula, because all of us have access to good plumbing. We can take a shower, you can use the toilet, and you don't need to be worried about so many diseases. We are inoculated against so many things, which would just mean death at that time for people. But this idea of don't die, it is so much more than him just not trying to die, because let's be honest, people always try to live in most circumstances if they're mentally healthy. I just feel like there is this innate idea in this man that he wants to challenge nature here. This is not like some scientific experiment or anything. I just feel like he's trying to defy nature. And that's my basic reading of his whole don't die thing. I love the idea that he's taking so much care of himself. Lovely. But the don't die part of it, everything decays. And like coming to terms with your death, all of us are mortal. We'll die at some point. I just feel like there's just some sort of rebellion against nature in this whole idea. I think I'll expand on this more, but I want other people to also give their thoughts on this. But for right now, this is my whole spiel on this. Like, man wants to rebel against nature.
All right, next who wants to go?
Yeah, I can go.
All right, go for it.
Think his logic does make sense. I mean, even the backstory that they go over in the documentary about how his lifestyle used to be while he made his fortune and whatnot, it does make sense for him to come to this conclusion, in my opinion. But what you said about the AI solving his problem and like his philosophy being that I just have to survive till that technology gets to that point, that doesn't seem as logical to me. I mean, what problems is he going to have? His life doesn't seem to be about living. If all he's trying to do is just to survive, he's not doing what we consider living, like new experiences, so doing something that we wouldn't do. We take chances every day, right? Like you could get hit by a car while crossing the street. Could just happen. I understand why he's chasing immortality, but I don't think there is anything he would really be using that immortality for other than just, bragging rights. Like, hey, I'm 200 years old. I'm the first man to be able to say that I'm this old. He probably would not have done much living compared to like a 30-year-old or 40-year-old maybe at that point.
Okay, I gotta respond to that because I do very much disagree with that. Natalia will come to you next. Because, I mean, he lives more than any of us do, realistically speaking. He travels, he does conferences, he goes out. Like, he lives a lot more than us, we do. And there is one thing about his philosophy that I do like. He talks about this in a lot in his YouTube channel, not in this documentary, where a lot of humanity has this die culture where we celebrate a lot of things that kill us, like alcohol, parties, doing work a lot, and like, being like an entrepreneur who doesn't sleep, stuff like that. Stuff that's like isn't particularly effective. It just, he calls it cope, and I kind of agree with it. Once you get to a stage where you are not doing a lot of like drinking every day, you realize that you don't really need alcohol to enjoy life. Like, to live doesn't mean you have to live dangerously. And by dangerously, there's like two different meanings here. One is living dangerously in that, like, just taking unnecessary risk, and then there's one dangerously where you're just taking normal levels of risk. Because you going out on the street is not really that risky. He goes out on the street. It's not like he's not going out on the street. But okay, to go like, one of those, what are they called?
Gondolas,
Like a sky bridge.
No, like when people jump and they have like a
bungee
jumpsuit.
jumping,
Not
bungee
bungee
jumping.
jumping.
Skydiving.
Not skydiving either. Like they have like this suit where they
Oh,
go.
that
Oh,
wingsuit.
yeah,
Fucking
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
lit.
okay. Yeah, okay. Like for example, like adrenaline junkies,
Paragliding.
right? Like people who do wingsuits.
No, paragliding is different, but yeah,
Oh, the
adrenaline.
paragliding is that thing,
Yeah, with
right?
the big ass
Yeah, it has a
tentacles. Yeah.
parachute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, it doesn't have parachute. It has that.
That big
It's like
kite looking
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Kite, kite.
yeah,
Exactly. It looks more like a kite, like a half kite.
Yeah.
yeah. So my point is, a lot of them, they're like adrenaline junkies who are doing dangerous things for the sake of chasing adrenaline, and not doing that doesn't mean you're not living. I don't think that was my interjection to that. Like, I don't agree with the idea that he's not living. I also don't agree with the idea that he's only surviving. Like, he's surviving because, he talks about in this documentary where he's like, oh, I want to live because I want to spend more time with my son. That's pretty chill, I think. That's not a bad motive or anything. All right, Natalia raised her hand, so let's move on to that.
I also want to talk about what Soham was saying, and I gotta say I agree with Shantanu in terms of like Bryan Johnson does have a very fulfilled life because he has no life admin to speak of, right? Like every all of his like chores and basic necessities are very well taken care of. He can spend all of his time pursuing a passion project. This isn't his job. He's not compelled to work on this in any way, shape, or form. He has enough money for like generations. So I agree with Shantanu in terms of him living a very fulfilled life because this is how he finds his purpose. But I agree with Soham in the sense of it seems like he can't really enjoy the finer things in life in terms of like he has such a strict food routine. He's so disciplined in everything he does that there isn't really any sign of giving himself a break. Like, does he enjoy fine dining? Does he not work out for a while? Does he just chill? It doesn't seem like he does. But yeah, I mean, if he's that driven about this, maybe he doesn't find satisfaction in taking a break because he doesn't feel the need to. He doesn't feel like he needs to disconnect from anything because he's so fulfilled in what he does. Which is interesting. Like, it must be nice be like being so happy with what you do that you don't feel the need to like walk away from it to like catch a breath. I agree with Soham's point, but like I agree with the sentiment, but yeah, I think Brian Johnson is very much enjoying his life right now. It seems like he is anyway in the documentary and everything. He seems like he is quote unquote happy with how things have turned out.
I just want to defend a little bit. Yeah, I mean, when I say he's not living, I didn't really mean he's not like partying it up or, enjoying his life. Like, yeah, he does exercise a lot, but he probably finds pleasure. And I don't exercise a lot, but when I do get some exercise, I do find pleasure in having done that. I don't think his life is without pleasure just because he doesn't engage in what like a common person would consider like a recreational substance or something. But what I meant was the fact that you restrict your sleep, your diet. He's put restrictions on his experience of life in order to achieve immortality. Like, immortality only makes sense to me if I could continue to live my life as I'm doing now. If it's like a Sisyphus sort of immortality where all I'm doing is just making sure that that rock doesn't go too far down today, then that's like, I don't know, like everything he's doing, sure, he does get to travel, as you say, where he's going there to talk about his whole philosophy. He does actually have the liberty. He can do pretty much anything that the world has to offer, but he is sort of restricting himself to chase this, which, by the way, I don't know if I said this, I don't actually oppose what he's doing. I think he should do this. There are other people doing this as well. He's doing it in one way, and I think it's interesting that we get to watch this happen. It's very interesting that someone with a lot of money is choosing to live their life like this. It's a good experience for us to watch. So I'm not opposed to it. I just don't think his many years will come with that much. life experience, what we consider life experience. Maybe I do have some thoughts about what his unique experience is going to be like, though we can get into that later.
I will just say one more thing. Sorry. Um, uh, okay. Let's Ahmad speak first.
Okay. I've held on to this for so long. I hope I have not forgotten. So when Shantru was saying that he does live his life, I tend to agree with that in the sense that most rich people we know throughout the history of mankind, sorry to say this, but they live sort of a debauched lifestyle. So in one way, it's really good to see a rich man not indulging in debauchery. But at the same time, this whole motive of don't die, like I really feel like it goes against the grain of the very basic tenet in Western philosophy about what a good person is, which is probably like Jesus Christ. He died, and that's when people realize like this man's life had this value. Like death has as much value as life. I feel like keep coming back to like this is this man's rebellion against nature. It just feels like he's trying to stop something as intrinsic as his own birth. And like when Soham says his quality of life, I tend to agree with Soham on this actually, especially that whole UV ray light shit he goes to. But I can see that this is what this man is driven to do, and so I think that's completely fine. But at the same time, I just feel like he's trying to stop something which is so innate in nature. That's all.
I think let's move on to Natalia's opinions on the whole don't die thing. She only responded to Soham. So if you have any opinions, go for it, Nance.
I mean, I feel like in our discussion, we've covered most of like how I feel. I agree with Hamad. Life has value because it ends one day, and we are able to generate a lot of meaning because it's not forever. And we will talk about this later in the podcast as well. But in the documentary, he also talks about how he was raised as a Mormon and how he left the church, and his entire persona and like building this like cult like following around himself as someone who's trying to be immortal, and as Hamad said, like a man trying to fight nature, trying to fight God essentially, right? It feels like, I want to say it's a very like narcissistic endeavor. Yeah, that's what I think. I think this is ultimately a very narcissistic endeavor, which, I mean, it doesn't have to be a bad thing in terms of like if what he's doing does help people live better lives in terms of like eating better and sleeping better and not being as stressed and trying to improve their quality of life. That's good, I guess. But yeah, that's how
Uh,
I feel
uh,
about the don't die community. Feels like a rich guy trying to do rich guy things.
yeah,
You know?
So Nats,
sure.
I have a question for you, even though I'm not the host of this.
Go for it.
Uh, what
Go
do
for
you?
it.
How do you feel this personal endeavor compares to Jeff Bezos's personal endeavor of going to space? What do you think has more value to humanity? Because I would argue that Bryan Johnson's endeavor has more value to humanity. Because even though I don't agree with the don't die principle, living longer is always better. Or do you think like a space race?
Oh, that is a very interesting question. I'm a huge sci-fi fan. So I feel like Jeff Bezos's contributions to like space technology would be a bigger boon for humanity, because I feel like advancing technology in that aspect would be better. Also, because Bryan Johnson's method of doing this isn't scientific, because he's just testing a lot of stuff on himself, and it's really hard to replicate what he's doing. Whereas if you're pumping money into technology, that is like directly better for all of
Um,
us, right?
all right, Nats, I have like one more question for you. So you said his endeavor was narcissistic in nature. Narcissistic is a strong
Yeah,
word. So
yeah.
can you just like expand on that?
So in terms of like this being a narcissistic endeavor, um one, he is able to like have all of this attention on himself and on every single aspect of his life, even in terms of him having a huge presence online, him being available online at all times. His PR agency is just him and an assistant. There is no barrier between him and the rest of the world. Feeds into why I would call this a narcissistic endeavor, because it is just, I mean, it is him trying to live as long as possible and making a public spectacle of it.
Hmm. All right, cool. In this,
Yeah.
so you mean like mostly because it's attention seeking, and also 'cause, like
Yes.
living
Yeah.
forever.
I
There's like
think
some amount of selfishness in wanting to live forever, I guess.
yes, of course. I think it is. There is a little bit of selfishness in wanting to stay alive for as long as possible.
Hmm. All right, that was a good discussion.
I do have something to say as well
Yeah.
about like rich people doing this, because we see a lot of that now, especially. Just having the money is not enough. They also want the recognition of like, oh, this rich guy is about this and this rich guy is about this.
Hmm.
Why does Elon Musk want to
Yeah, like
post
Bezos
memes all
being
day?
this
Dude, like he's fucking 50 years old. I wouldn't want to post memes all day, and I'm like, it's like I'm past that age now.
I must
Change his
say
name to
though,
as
Kekimus
a
Maximus or something. Like
24-year-old.
this was headlines. Like imagine being a journalist who has to write this as a headline. Elon Musk changed his fucking. Yeah, dude, he went into settings and he changed his. What are you, man? Like, what is your
Hmm.
job and what is his life? Like, where are we?
I have a beautiful podcast idea. Elon, his father, and his first son. That will be a podcast I'll watch.
Okay, getting
That's
back on
huge.
track. Cool. My thoughts on Don't I? I think it's actually makes a lot of sense, honestly. I do think there's this thing where he was a Mormon, right? Like he fully believed in the ideology and everything around it. And he broke out of that. And then he had to start from scratch. And a thing you can do is just go from believing in that ideology to whatever the main ideology of the time is. For him, that would just be like American neoliberal Western history of philosophy, ideology, everything like just what most common Americans believe in. And I think because he broke out of one ideology, he can also see a lot of ideological aspects about how we live. For example, when Hamad said, I feel like he's just fighting against nature, where does that statement come from? It comes from our understanding of nature that we get from some philosophical understanding about nature that we have from some ideology ultimately. Maybe philosophy is a better word, not ideology, I don't know. But there's like this thing where he can like look at these perspectives of looking at the world as like constructs, and because he broke out of one construct, he can look at the other things and see, okay, here is also a construct. And he's saying to think that death is inevitable and that value in death is in itself a construct that we then my other point is uh, there is also this idea his life isn't that great because he's not into the finer things of life. This I will speak from my experience, which is there was a point where I really liked eating chocolates and sugar and everything, like just desserts. And then I was not eating desserts for a very long time. And when I was not eating dessert, my taste buds kind of readjusted. And I realized like a lot of desserts is like just too much sugar. And even if you have an apple, that's a lot of sugar in an apple, and it's like it tastes sweet. But if you are having desserts all the time, an apple doesn't taste sweet. And when he says he thinks his food tastes better than all other food, I kind of get where he's coming from because he is eating such a clean diet. Even like the subtle flavors coming from, I don't know, broccoli or some shit probably tastes loud to him, which because we are like so numb to those flavors, we don't get. And the third thing is, he also is trying to live forever, right? Like he has a lot of time to do anything he wants to do. Like at some point, if he figures out, okay, I can just continue living on forever if I dedicate 30% of my day to all of this shit, then like he has the rest of the time to do whatever. He has unlimited time in his perspective. So his actions of like fully going into this make a lot of sense, because if you go with this and you succeed, you have a lot of time. Okay, everybody wants to respond to this. So we'll start with Natalia because she raised her hand first and we'll go on.
Okay, so I raised my hand when you were talking about how he left Mormonism and had to start from scratch. And because he's outside of the system, so to speak, he's able to maybe more objectively view constructs for what they are. And I was raised religiously, right? For context for the audience, my family is Muslim. I was raised in a Muslim environment. So, yeah, when I agree with Hamad about him rebelling against nature and him rebelling against God, that does come from um like that. I'm trying to find a good way to phrase this. That does come from my understanding of life and death, that is influenced by my religious upbringing. Even though I'm not religious anymore, that does have like a very big effect on how I view life and death. But even then, like knowing that I have such a biased view of this, I find it hard to agree with his philosophy of, yeah,
Why do
I
you
still
find it
find it
hard
hard
to
to
agree though?
agree. I mean, like like I said before, right? Like death is what gives life meaning. And I don't know. I think it's one of those things of you don't really think about death for a majority of your life. So now in this discussion and watching this documentary, when you're thinking about it, you end up really analyzing your underlying beliefs. And it's like, oh, it's just this is what I have grown up with. And I haven't really fully broken it down the way he has, for example, right? Like, I haven't left the mosque, I haven't left my community or anything like that. So I haven't had to start from scratch the way he has. And maybe that is what is restricting me. That's why I believe what I believe versus believing what he believes.
Mm.
But yeah, that is what I wanted to talk about.
All right,
So
cool. Okay. I mean, I don't really have a response to that in the sense that, okay, like that just means if you have an emotional blockage to a logical idea, that just means there's like more need to analyze.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. But Hamad also raised his
Yeah.
hand
Okay,
immediately
Hamad, go
after
for
I
it.
did. So go for it, Hamad.
Uh, you know, I just I just want to harp back to one of the first documentaries we did a review of, and I'm not sure if Natalia was a part of that, but it was the Fantastic Lives of Mushrooms.
Yeah.
And from like how those mushrooms develop, it's just like so damp, and there's like a lot of, obviously they feed off a lot of the microorganisms which have died in their symbiotic sphere. And through that, like I think this is one of the very cool ideas I find in Hinduism, is also the idea of reincarnation. Even there is death involved, and then there is that reincarnation. To some extent, I agree that when Shantanu says, this is like sort of a construct about death, but more than death, like just the decay, like watching his skin is more flawless than mine. And I not to brag, but I have like some good genetics and everything. And my skin is pretty good. And this man looks so young, so young. Like he is so pale, it scares me a little bit. But more importantly, when I say he's challenging nature or he's rebelling, he's like questioning the whole point of our existence until now. Like it's not just a construct. Like Great men, great women, great people have lived and they have always died. And then there's this man, he's like, don't die. I think it's like anthema to so much of what people believe in. I think that's why it's such a hard idea to actually wrap your head around it. Like, that's my 2 cents on it.
All right. What about you, Soham? You also raise your hands.
Yeah, I raised my hand when you were talking about the point of immortality is that he will have time to do whatever he wants to at some point. I just want to say, if it wasn't clear, I'm not actually opposed to his don't die
Yeah,
philosophy
yeah.
the way Hamad and Natalia have said that he is cheating death. I mean, I see that he is cheating death. I'm not against it. I don't see anything wrong with that. But I'm just speaking on his behalf, like a little bit. I don't think he has time to do stuff, not because of the risk involved, just because I don't think he can really break the routine that he set for his body. Like, he keeps repeating that your body loves a routine. What if the experience I'm thinking of is like, staying up till 2 a.m. or something just to witness something? What effect would, like, if you normally sleep at 11, like Hamad sleeps earlier than me, but for him to be able to stay up one night, it will have an effect on his routine a little bit. It will definitely affect it for the next day, maybe a few days, but he will be able to bounce back from it. But what if Bryan Johnson, after 20 years of this very strict regimen, what if he has even one change in his routine? I don't think he actually does have opportunities late, because once he commits to this, I think it's going to be like one of those medications where you have to keep taking the medication to avail the benefits. It's not like I took the medication yesterday and now today I'll go out and live my life. That's about it.
Hmm. All right. I'll just respond to Soham's thing one last time and then we can move on to the next topic. We spent like half an hour on this now. But this is probably the most interesting, which is I assume, I mean, I don't know, I'm just predicting this, but I assume eventually it becomes less and less of a burden to do this. Like tech gets good enough, infrastructure gets developed. He takes 20 pills. Like, eventually he'll make all those 20 pills into one pill. Like he already has a mix. I assume all of this becomes a lot less work as you go, because a lot of his effort is probably not paying off right now because he's in like that exploration phase where he's trying shit. And when you try shit enough, you'll know what works and what doesn't work. And eventually you get to a point where you're only doing stuff that works, and that's good enough. Okay, Natalia, you raised your hand.
I just want to rebut against your point, and then yeah, we'll move on to the next thing. I agree with Soham in terms of it doesn't feel like he will be able to quote unquote enjoy his life because he won't be able to break out of the routine because cells decay, life decays, right? What he's doing is a constant fight against decay. And from what we know about life and cells so far, is that it is always going to be a constant fight against decay. I don't think there will be a point where he can just be like, yes, I am immortal now, like a vampire, and he can do whatever he wants. I agree with Soham. The fight doesn't stop.
All right, cool. This is like the game we play, Don't Starve, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's exactly
eventually.
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It's going
But
to
like,
spoil eventually. Like, you really have to keep cooking it again and again.
yeah,
You
but
have to,
like
yeah,
you get to a point where
exactly.
you have
Yeah.
enough of a base developed that all the maintenance stuff doesn't take up your entire time. It only takes up like 20-30% of your time.
But the icebox also only
And that's
slow
when you,
spoiling, right? Like, it doesn't stop spoiling.
yeah, but you can
Yeah.
make
That's,
more ice
yeah.
boxes and you can collect more food. Like,
Yeah, different food.
yeah, yeah.
No, but that is just game mechanics. I mean, what we are talking about cheating, that is like, I don't
Yeah.
think like, I wouldn't use this logic to argue against what Brian Johnson is doing, because he is trying to break the rules. I will give him that. Like, he is trying to, and I'm not into this whole feed, but I don't think he's the only one. So
He's definitely not the
is
only
Yeah,
one.
that's true. He's
is
definitely
he
not
He's
the only.
biologically the oldest person who is doing this? Because if, like, if all of them are trying to live forever, it would be pretty cool to say that I am the oldest one among all these
no,
immortal
so there's
beings.
this guy called Ray Kurzweil who I know. I mean, there might be more. This only other person I know who's trying to do this, but he's not doing it with as much of the
So he's
main
probably
point.
the oldest right now, but he's probably not going to be the oldest for a long time.
And if you start and if you live forever, he will be the oldest forever, I guess. But he, I think Ray Kurzweil is not as into it as Brian Johnson is, where it's not like it's the central part of his life. It's like one of his hobbies of out of many. Yeah, not
I mean,
100%. Let's move on. Okay, cool. Okay, so the next topic is he doing it the right way? If we accept that longevity is a goal that we want to go towards, is what he is doing the right way of doing things? Who wants to start with this one? Okay, Natalia, you can start.
Okay, they address this in the documentary as well, where part of the documentary are like interviews with scientists where they talk about the trials they do and like Bryan Johnson's effect on the scientific community and things like that. And the documentary also covers both perspectives, right? Where there are some quote unquote longevity consultants that work with Bryan Johnson and agree with what he's doing. And there are some scientists that don't agree with what he's doing because it is, and I agree with the latter because it's not scientific. It's very hard to have concrete evidence of what works and what doesn't because he is trying everything. He publishes whatever he does online, which I appreciate, which is really good. You can track all of his progress from when he started to now. But he takes over 130 supplements, right? Like he tries and drops different drugs on a very regular basis. He's done gene therapy. He's doing every single thing. And it's difficult to actually base this in like there's no like he's doing a lot of things on himself, whereas other billionaires might fund scientific trials, which is the thing that I agree with, where you fund scientific trials and you do this following like correct procedure where you have like control groups and you test things out and you see what works and what doesn't, versus trying to emulate what Bryan Johnson does. So yeah, I don't think this is the best way to go about it, but also he's an adult with his own money, so fair enough to him. He can do what he likes. What he's doing is not hurting anyone in any way. So in that way, I can't really dictate how he spends his money because he's not really hurting anyone. And I mean, in fact, what he's doing may be helping a lot of people. But yeah, I don't think this is the best way to go about it.
All right, Soham, you go next.
I would agree with Nats a little bit in that, yeah, he does. It does make it difficult to pinpoint exactly what is having an effect. I don't think they explicitly mention it, but I think he is also sort of trying to isolate effect. He can change certain things out of his regimen to closely monitor the effect of one particular supplement, maybe. Like, I feel like they are probably doing that themselves, like to figure out what is more effective and what isn't. And this, I was actually thinking, as like sort of cope on his part as well. It gives him some variation in his routine, because when I try to put myself in his shoes a little bit, to think about creating a routine for your entire day that you have to follow forever. I mean, if all goes right according to his plan, he will be doing this every single day till the end of time. I mean, most natural calamities are not really going to hurt him. He has significant wealth. I think he can, like in the cases of those movies like 2012 and stuff, I'm pretty sure he'll already be on the ship before. He doesn't really have to rush through traffic to make it onto the ship. So I don't think stuff like that is really going to hurt him. So to think about doing something the same way for even 50 years, I mean, it's, and I want to get into this a little bit later. He does a lot for his physical health, but what is immortality going to do to like his brain, right? It's going to change his own perspective on things so many times in his quest for living forever. He's planning on living forever. It's a little daunting to think about his psyche at that point.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said makes sense. Although I will say this much, that there's like a lot of things we also do that we just have to do every day. Like we have to brush every single day till we die. Like this, it's just something we're gonna do. And I mean, you can skip brushing, but like you gotta like poop every single day. That you can't skip. What he does is a lot of shit, but if he can reduce that to like half an hour or an hour of stuff that he has to do every day, I think that's pretty chill. But there's this idea called anti-fragility. Like evolution is anti-fragile because it does a lot of different things and then it gets used to it and adopts to it. He should be doing a lot of different things. If he's just doing one routine forever, he becomes fragile in that if that routine breaks down for whatever reason, then he's fully exposed. Like it's like a strong thing that's fragile from an angle that if that angle hits it, like it's just gonna break completely.
In gaming, we call that a glass cannon. It's like very effective, but it's like an Achilles heel sort of thing. Like it has its own weakness.
Yeah. Yeah, for example, when he came to India, he had to carry around a air purifier everywhere, which, to be fair, India's air is bad and you should all use air purifiers and we should all be using air purifiers. Or maybe not in Kashmir, I guess. There is a thing where he makes his routine into something that only works in very limited spaces, then he can't go out of those spaces, which is an issue. Okay, next, Hamad, do you want to talk about this?
I'm going to keep it very short because I feel like Natalia and so you guys have discussed most of what could be discussed here. I am just skeptical about how what he's doing. I just fail to see how this would trickle down to everybody. That's all. I can understand if you follow him properly and see some of the things he's doing. We provenly know that these are really good things, like his diet. And I must say that I so strongly agree with him on his diet because American food is really, really bad. I know it looks like gloop and everything. And my personal experience with this is a super Indian superfood called millets. Initially, it was really hard for me to change over from rice to millets. But eventually, like you just start seeing the taste in it. And like before you know it, like in 30 days or 40 days, it tastes really good. Like I noticed the same thing when I stopped putting sugar in my tea. I started to realize that milk has its own sweetness. So that part of his stuff I really agree with. But where it gets really daunting for me is with those 130 supplements. So which works and which doesn't work is I don't know how he figures it out. I guess he does have some process to it. I just fail to see like how it would help everybody. That's all.
For a man who believes in trickle down economics, you don't believe this will trickle down, Hamad.
Man, trickle down economics is so 2010s. We are in the 2020s. Nothing trickles down anymore.
All right, Natalia, I'll let you respond to that and then Soham.
Okay, so I disagree with you, Hamad. I think this does have potential to trickle down. Not entirely, because this is something he says repeatedly, not just in the documentary, but in other like videos and stuff as well, stuff in like content that Shantanu has made me watch and things like that. He does say that what he is doing is not possible for like 99.9% of the population. His entire regime is not meant to be emulated. But what he is doing is he's trying to do everything and test everything out so we can see what works and we can try to the best of our ability to like do what he does. So if you go to his website, the blueprint or whatever, he does have stages of anti-aging. And stage 1 itself is like if you quit smoking you gain 12 years of your life, if you cut out sugar you gain like X years back, if you sleep well you gain X years back, if you exercise for an hour a day you get X years back, and things like that. So even following that will improve your quality of life. So I think it does trickle down. I think even being able to follow like level 1 of what he's practicing will definitely help. And by the end of the documentary, when he talks about his Don't Die community, that is what he's trying with his community, right? Like they organize hikes and a lot of runs and like rock climbing events and a lot of like physical activities designed to like help you move more. So yeah, I think it does trickle down. I think what he is trying, especially with community events,
I mean, that's pretty cool. My main problem with him is, see, the supplement thing is also very jarring because already supplements are such a controversial topic, right? According to most doctors, they don't. They would say like X
Mhm.
doesn't work, but that doesn't mean Y doesn't work. Like I'll give you a good example. There is a supplement called biotin, and it's amazing for hair growth and to keep your bones strong. However, it will never work for a guy who's bald. So that person taking biotin makes no difference for him at that point. You know, it's the same thing with a very very popular supplement which I can vouch for called Centrum, and like for old people, it's super effective because you start dealing with arthritis and your knees start getting weak. But when this man is taking 130, how does he know A worked and B didn't work, or B worked and A didn't work? So what is good and what is bad? Like, does he have like a whole chart?
Yeah,
Like, okay, I'm getting my magnesium from this, I'm getting my this from that. And I am not even opposed to alternative therapies. Like I'm not opposed to it at all because, like, I know sometimes science says like X doesn't work, but somehow it works for other people. Like chiropractic is supposed to be a huge scam, but in India alone, there's so many people who go to chiropractor and like they get some relief out of it. Like, so I don't know, like that's what really jars me. The thing about him leaving smoking, him cutting out sugar, these are basic things everybody should be doing at this stage. I mean, smoking at this point, like we have like 90 plus years of data at this point to show that it's bad.
I agree with you in terms of like it's hard to see what works and what doesn't, which ties back to my earlier point of like this isn't scientific, which yeah, I think it isn't. But he does have like hospital grade medical equipment in his house, and he does have a team of doctors like constantly monitoring him. That was one of his things, right? Like he is the most monitored man in the world, and he checks every possible level at all times, right? Like he has blood tests on the regular. So I guess as far as physically possible, he is able to monitor every single thing in his body, which is how he is able to keep track of all of these supplements. Again, that is an assumption I am working off of, that like there must be some sort of method to his madness. But yeah, no, I agree with you, Hamad, in terms of like that's the point, right? Like that it is unscientific. So like the supplement he's taking might not be good for us, which is why I think that what he's doing isn't the best way to do things. And like funding scientific trials would be a better use of his money, in my opinion. Obviously, I can't tell him how to spend his
Okay,
money.
cool.
That's his choice.
I'm going to respond to what Natalia said and then I'll go to Soham, okay? Um, so, one thing I want to say is when we say it's not scientific, it is pretty scientific. It's not that it's not scientific. There are different types of studies you can do, and what he's doing is case studying himself, N of one experiments. And I think that's a fully legitimate way of doing research. The problem comes when you do N of one experiments and then you extrapolate out to population levels from your N of one experiments, which I think is a little bit of an issue with his supplement regime that he has designed by experimenting on himself, and then he's selling it to other people to try on themselves, which I do think is like a little bit of a questionable thing. Although I will say this much, I'm not a scientist, none of us are close to being scientists, and he has a team of scientists working for him, so they probably thought about the same thing. The other thing is like when you do population studies, this also has like intrinsic issues on it, in it. For example, you take a drug, you test it on a population, 33% of the people have like a very positive reaction to the drug. 33% of the people have like a very mild positive reaction to the drug, and 33% of the people show no effect from the drug. Okay, that drug will be approved by almost every agency in the world and will be in the market and will be sold as a solution to your problem. Even though there are 33% of the people it doesn't work on at all, and then there are like 33% which it only works like barely on. Population level studies and then extrapolating it to an individual has as much problems as studying an individual and extrapolating it to a population. And that's why we have clinicians, like that's why doctors exist, and they prescribe different drugs on you to see which one is effective, which one doesn't work. So I do think there's like what he's doing is scientific in that he's doing the trials on himself, And he's measuring more than any of these scientific studies measure. When you trial drugs, you are trialing it on like 100 people, 200 people. And those people, a lot of it is self-reporting many times, which is like really sketch. Like research methods is a sketch thing. A lot of scientific studies, I mean, they're done well, but it's still, there's a lot of holes in that system as well. So I would call what he's doing scientific. It's not unscientific for sure. But I do think there are some issues in doing experiments on yourself and extrapolating it to the whole population. All right. Soham, you raised your hand.
Yeah, so based on what all of us have been saying on this particular subtopic, I think the main issues here are because of his whole regiment of so many supplements. We can't pinpoint what is causing something, and also whether what he's doing will be helpful to other people. And in terms of the first point, I think, like Nat said, he has a lot of medical people around him who are monitoring his vitals constantly. So I do think he can, to some extent, pinpoint what is doing what to him. The important part there is that it's pinpointing it in his body. Yeah, like Shantanu said, it's not going to really help the general population. It's good that he's monitoring it. Other people can also go through the data, I guess. But the trickle down aspect of it, I think if he wanted it to trickle down, he could do it better. At some point in the documentary, I don't know if it was a doctor or a research fellow in some way, but they did point out that if he is confident about a certain drug or technique procedure, he has the funds to be able to fund research in that particular venture to see if there are any hard evidence of this having an impact, that he can do that. And he can, if he doesn't want to wait around for it, he can do that while he undergoes the treatment or therapy himself. Like he doesn't have to wait for the results, but he can, if he does want it to trickle down, I think it's going to be up to him whether he wants his experimenting to also be tested for the wider population, or if he just wants it to be like, it worked on me, I did a little bit of research into whether it will work on you, and yeah, I've decided that it will. So yeah, that was my last point in this, in that he markets himself as an influencer even though it's not an influencer like most influencers are. But we probably can't or aren't viable to be influenced by him, and we probably shouldn't really take his advice. Like if something interesting does come from him, as in this is something that no one else is pushing but we think it's very credible, I think it would be smarter to wait. The point you made about clinical trials also makes a lot of sense to me. So your whole argument about going from many people to one person is the same as going from one person to many people. It makes complete sense, but maybe like a second opinion would also be beneficial. Like it can't just be because there's other people in the longevity game. So maybe just going off of one guy's advice is just doesn't seem very smart as like a normal listener to like think that, oh, this is working for Johnson, maybe it'll work for me as well.
I agree with what you said, so on most of it. I just want to expand on the trickle down part one more time and then we can move on. I was talking about how much his stuff can trickle down. I do think there's like a lot of things he's done that where he's trying to actively trickle down his experiments to the larger public. So he's made an app where people can participate, post their scores. I think a lot of trickle down comes not from what he's done as research, but more from just influencer stuff, just promoting being healthy, which he's doing very actively and very loudly. I also think there's like a new thing happening recently where getting healthier is becoming like a status signal, which it wasn't before. It's just becoming like a whole health aesthetics and stuff. Having fancy sports gear and fancy gym gear and shit is becoming like a status signal. So there is that happening. It's not the worst thing. Like becoming healthy is not a bad thing. So making healthy become a class thing is not good. But I mean, he's not doing that. But like that's the thing that's happening regardless.
I want it to be done in India ASAP because our genetics. No, when I say our genetics, I don't mean India. I mean like this whole our continent. Nah, This fucking paunch used to be like a symbol of wealth because only the wealthy could afford to have a paunch because everybody was doing hard labor and shit. And even
Yeah.
to this day,
Khate
there's like
pite
some
ghar ka.
there's some
It's like a
genetic.
whole proverb.
Yeah, dude, like I'm telling you, it's like ingrained in our culture for like centuries. Like having a paunch was like, but now we know that's so bad. Like it increases chances of visceral fat storage. Like it can block your arteries. You can get cancer. Like it's so bad now.
It, it's
Not
true. It's not just Indian thing though. Like it used to be a big thing in Europe as well.
paunch.
Yeah, paunch being
Oh,
a
okay.
status of
I
wealth
thought
and
it was just an
aristocracy
Asian
and
thing.
stuff was a
Dude, have
European
you
thing as well.
played Assassin's Creed? There's
No.
a whole quest where like this guy, he's supposed to be marrying like a very plump woman with royal descent, but he runs off with like this skinny harlot, and like everyone in his family is like, oh, why are you, dude? There's a song by Louis Prima called Closer to the Bone where he's like making a song about how he likes skinny women, and like that was like a whole, it was a very new idea for them because they had a whole obsession with thick women at that point again.
Mhm.
Louis
I
Prima
think
is very
these.
old.
Yeah, I think these things I keep going in and out of fashion,
Yeah.
but just feel like if like everybody should strive to be healthy, man. Mainly like being healthy might seem like expensive in the short term, but being unhealthy is so fucking expensive in the long term. It drags you down. Like today in India, most people are not healthy, and I would love that. Love for that to change.
All right. Let's move on to the next topic, which was his personal life. It's a documentary about him. Obviously, we'll have to talk about his personal life. So we're gonna cover like two parts of it. Let's first talk about his social life, which is his family, friends, and everything. And then we can talk about the routine stuff, at the willpower and everything. So first, we'll start with social life. And Natalia had strong opinions about it. So let's start with Natalia.
Okay, so for most of the documentary, we don't really see him have a thriving social life. He spends a lot of time with his son, Talmadge. We don't really know much about his ex wife or his other children, presumably because he left the church and maybe not cut ties with his family, but did distance himself from his family. And his son, Talmadge, left the church as well. So that becomes like a really strong um, bond between the two of them. And in the documentary, we also see him rebuild like his relationship with his dad. But yeah, apart from that, we don't really see him have like a close group of friends or people to like talk to about a lot of stuff. Like he talks to his assistant, but that's his assistant. That's not really like a friend you can confide in. So I think his social life is and this also feeds into like why he built the Don't Die community, because he doesn't have a social network to rely on. One thing I do appreciate is that in the documentary he does talk about human beings being social creatures, and he doesn't see himself as like a lone man against the world. But I think he does struggle to form meaningful social relationships with other people, which is why, like, one major, I mean, the way the documentary framed it, one major drive for him to establish the Don't Die community was because his son turned 18 and left the house and went to college, right? And like his son is starting his life. So obviously he can't just like be with his dad forever. This does also feed into like him wanting to spend several lifetimes with his son, which is like part of why he wants to live forever, because he wants to spend as much time with his child as possible. I think, I mean, that's a really nice sentiment, but it's really codependent. And it's, I think, a really heavy burden on his son to like help maintain his dad's mental health. And in the documentary, like his son is outright like, I am worried about him. I am worried about how he'll be once I leave the house. which is kind of sad because like he's this kid who's really excited to start his life and go off to college and stuff, but he can't fully enjoy that because in the back of his mind he is going to obviously be thinking about how his dad is coping, which is that's a heavy thing for a kid to carry. So his son like very happily participates in everything his dad does, and they do the don't die regime together, and he's donated plasma for his dad and he seemed very willing to do it. Like he wasn't pressured to like donate, like give his dad plasma and shit, which is nice. Like he's obviously a very caring son, but I think Bryan Johnson does have what I think is slightly unhealthy dependence on his son because he doesn't really have that strong a bond with anyone else.
Mm. All right, Italia, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, first, Hamad, do you want to comment on it?
Yeah. So I'll just do this quickly and then Shantanu, you can counter it. I genuinely don't think it's a bad thing that the son is so concerned about his father. I mean, you must note that he comes from like a broken family. And like his dad is doing something very, very different. Not like it's very much against the societal norm. So I don't think, yeah, maybe it's a tad bit unhealthy, but overall, I think it's great for Brian to have a son who cares that much.
All right, so what about you?
Yeah, I mean, the codependence is a little weird. I don't know if we're actually going to talk about this too much for this documentary, but the way most of the documentary feels is as if their PR people, like the woman, she has directed or like put together the documentary. I don't actually think they had much control over how it was shot and how it was put together, but if they were at least shown what kind of footage they were going to use and stuff like that, like a lot of the weird glances that he gives his son, it just, I don't know, there's something weird about him after that saying that, I want to spend multiple lifetimes with my son. Not creepy in like a sexual way, that like if that's what was being interpreted, but one side it's difficult because like this is his coming of age for Talmage, but on the other hand his father, who a huge part of your coming of age is you accepting the fact that, oh, my father is an old man now, soon I'm going to have to look out for him the way he looked out for me. Like life is a little cyclical in that sense, right? Like you as a toddler you wear diapers, and probably as like a senior citizen you also, you're back in diapers, like you can't really take care of yourself, there are people taking care of you. So I think his coming of age itself is a little skewed in that it's very weird to see one guy looking forward to growing older, in a sense, like going from 17 to 18 is growing older, but like for him growing older comes with more liberty, and this guy wants to reverse his age. And like I've already said what I had to say about Bryan Johnson and his liberty over his own life, but it's a very weird comparison to watch. And we didn't do this segment for this episode, but like one of my reasons to watch this podcast was along with like just watching a crazy guy who's also rich, not a crazy rich guy, but crazy guy who's also rich live out his life, was to see how weird that father son relationship can be. It's also like the root of most hero stories, the father son relationship. Weird to see it in this context.
I do agree with you that like he has like a little bit of a. It's not creepy as much as it's just like he just has like that 2010 Zuckerberg vibe to him. I don't know. His son doesn't feel like that. His son feels pretty chill. He himself feels a little like socially awkward. I don't know what else to call that, which is fine. That's not like a big minus. A lot of people are socially awkward, and most of like the tech founders are. It's not just him. Silicon Valley itself is just like a socially off place, so it's not surprising. I mean, other than that whole thing with his son, and his father going and doing the plasma therapy is just different. I don't know what to say to that. Like, I don't know how to react to it. It's just so weird. It was a whole thing for him, but from the outside looking in, it's just weird.
It's a weird family moment that we sort of become a part of, right? Maybe you did this and you didn't tell anyone about this. Like, I'm sure you felt really good about doing this, but maybe
Yeah.
you don't tell other people that you did this. Like,
Yeah.
imagine Silicon Valley. He had
I
a
mean,
blood boy. It wasn't a blood son. Like, he just had a blood boy. He wasn't getting it from his own.
that's what raised like the uncanny factor was that like jokes were already being made about this concept of a blood boy on Silicon Valley. A lot of headlines and things made it feel like he's using his son as a living blood bank, which in the documentary we obviously see isn't true, right? Like it's spun as this really wholesome family moment. Bryan Johnson gives plasma to his dad, and Talmadge gives plasma to Bryan Johnson, and it's like grandfather, father, son having this really wholesome moment, and they come together and they hug, and it's very sweet. It's kind of weird that we see it though. Yeah, it is a very intimate moment that it feels voyeuristic to like look into this intimate moment. Not everything needs to be like put on camera,
I
you
will
know?
say that it made you feel uncanny. Like 130 supplements every day feels
Mhm.
daunting, but it doesn't seem that uncanny because at the end of the day, it's just like popping pills. But this was where like it actually felt like, okay, this is defamiliarization. Like this is something that I'm actually having a little bit of trouble to like wrap my head around. This could probably be like the first major moment like this, like a very unique experience that he is going to have that very few other people probably will have. And yeah, I mean, I can't
Mhm.
wait to talk about like what his actual immortality could end up being.
All right. I think that's enough about his social life. I do want to talk about his routine and like just his personal life because it's just insane discipline to keep up with what he's doing. I could not do that. Like, I straight up cannot do that. I can't do all of that shit every single day. So, I just wanted to talk about that. Do you think that's like replicable with a lot of people, what he's doing, the way he's doing it?
I can start because I think having that level of discipline is it's really hard for like the common man to try and achieve because you spend a lot of your time taking care of a house and having a job. So you end up spending a lot of your patience, your time, your energy, and your effort doing these things. So to then come home and maintain a level of discipline where you take care of your body can often be really overwhelming. I mean, like from my personal experience, right? Like this is purely anecdotal. Really struggled with maintaining a sense of discipline in terms of like taking care of my health, exercising more, and pursuing my passion projects, like being able to create more and to write more and things like that, where I tried to have a sense of discipline and then I would inevitably fail because things got really overwhelming and then I would feel really bad and punish myself for it. So it took a lot of time for me to like be kinder to myself and know that you don't have to have such a strict level of discipline, which I think a lot of people end up doing, right? Like that is a thing that a lot of people are preaching online, essentially, right? To like be more forgiving to yourself, be kinder to yourself. You don't have to like stick to that routine all the time. You can afford a break. You don't have to do things every day, which is the polar opposite to what Bryan Johnson is doing. Like it's completely antithetical to his whole philosophy, right? Of like maintaining that routine and sticking with it no matter what. So yeah, that's how I feel about his routine. I mean, I'm very impressed that he has the discipline to do it, but I do not think a lot of people can keep up with that.
Soham, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I think what Nats was saying makes a lot of sense. I mean, most people don't have. I mean, they we have control over our lives, but there are so many things that are out of our scope in controlling that. I mean, think about the like pretty much the center of his routine is that he gets extremely regular sleep. That, like, if you have a young kid, you can't really control that. If you have a certain kind of job, you can't really control that. Just stuff like a lot of liberty that he has because not just because of his wealth. I don't think every rich person also has that liberty with their life, but his unique position in society has given him the liberty to be able to pursue this, which I know sounds sort of hypocritical with my other argument about him not having much liberty over his life. But we, I don't think, can afford that liberty as well to the routine. But even then, given that, I don't think I could stick, because I struggle a lot with routine. My brain is wired differently in the sense that if I feel like I'm in a routine, I actively want to break it because I don't want to be stuck. Like, I consider it being stuck in a routine, which I know is unhealthy. Most people would probably want to develop some sort of routine. But yeah, so I don't think I could, like, not even a fraction of what he's doing. I mean, that's why I considered it not living, like, personally, because I would just not be having a good time if that was my life, even if I could do it for like 2000 years.
Hamad, what do you think about this?
Uh, I think you have to be really privileged to follow such a routine. You know, like imagine you working a job and like it would all go for a toss. Like in some sense, I believe in following some routines. Like I have a routine myself, and I feel like once your body gets into it, it's easy to do. But I just don't think that it's easy for everyone. Like everyone's goals are not the same. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how he's doing it, man. That's all I have to say to it. It's as extreme as they come. Especially the sleep thing. I mean, it's a proven thing that, sleep is so beneficial for you. And yet, most of us don't get enough sleep. And this man is acing it out there.
The sleep thing really got to me because it's been like one of my biggest struggles with life.
Even I agree that like the routine thing is just difficult. I mean, I don't know how he does it. He's not the only one who does it. A lot of people have very like regimented routines, but I do think everybody has their own style with routine. Like I think routines work for a lot of people, and they just simply don't work for a lot of people. So I do think some of the stuff he's doing is just not replicable for a lot of people in that sense. Okay, I think we should move on from this now. So, next topic of discussion is what do we think about his messaging and his online presence? I do want to start this off with saying he has a remarkably huge online presence. Like, that guy is on every podcast I hear. Like, he's been on every interview podcast I've heard in my life, every single one. Even stuff like The Stoa, which is a fairly small podcast, which has about 1,000 listeners regularly, possibly, and that's also a stretch. And he was there. Like he's on every single thing. Like he's on Indian podcasts. He's on like the huge ones. He's on really small podcasts as well. And then apart from that, he's a big deal in like traditional media. Journalists cover him quite a bit. So in general, like his presence is huge. And with that context, Hamad, you want to start this time?
I almost feel like he has become sort of a messiah for this community. And more importantly, I feel like he ropes in a lot of people for this community. As Natalia has pointed out quite a few times in this podcast alone, there are other people doing this as well. Other people who are taking more scientific approaches to their longevity and all that shit. But I just feel like it's crazy branding and it's crazy marketing on his end. He's almost like this crazy figure. I know there's a lot of hate he gets, but at the same time, he has a lot of followers. And this is proven by the fact that he said like he's on these Indian podcasts. I feel like he's naturally a very interesting person to get on for anybody, because of his whole don't die thing. Like he's just great at that whole thing. Yeah.
Should we invite him? I mean, he might. It would be very interesting to get the subject of a documentary to comment on their own documentary. That would have
Yeah.
been interesting.
Wouldn't that be
Wouldn't that
interesting?
be
uh,
insane? Our fourth episode and Bryan Johnson comments like, "Wow, good discussion, you guys.
Dude,
I'd
he
love to
is
follow
on
up on
Twitter
this."
24/7. His online presence is insane. There's a lot of celebrities who would pay so much to be as famous as he is. Being popular is not even like his main thing. So it's kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous.
No, that's like one point I
That's
wanted
what
to make about him as an influencer. Like, based on what influencer is now considered as, I think it's a little insulting to call him an influencer, because he actually does have a reason. Like what Hamad just said, he's a good get for any podcast, for any media, like anything that wants to put something out there. He's a good get, because even if people agree with him, even if people disagree with him, it's a very interesting thing to listen to because of how unique it is. But I think over time, it's just a thing that I've seen over my coming of age, where I thought, okay, this person is interesting. They will always sort of have an audience on the internet. There is like this, not fear, but there's just this chance that his audience becomes more of a, not hate watch itself, but like more of a lol cow audience, where people are just tuning in to sort of get their fill of, like, cringe and hate are like wrong words in this case, but lolcow is like a pretty well understood term, I think, on the internet. And I think there is like a chance where he becomes that over time. And like, time is such a weird thing to speak about in like his regard, because time could be anything. Like it could be 8 years or it could be 20 years. His perception in the media is obviously going to change over time. I mean, what happens when his fucking PR woman, she dies? She's not doing the don't die stuff. She's going to
She
die.
is.
What?
Yeah, dude,
she
she is.
is.
Also, her,
She can't
She
do
is dead,
everything that he's doing though, right? Like,
isn't
yeah,
she?
she is doing it, and I also, she has her own thing now. Like, she has her own Instagram that's kind of blown up.
no,
Um,
I'm not, I'm just saying, like, I don't think she, like everything else about Bryan Johnson, like the natural disaster and all, like protection from him, it's only going to be like, I don't think she has much, or maybe who knows, man? Maybe this will make her wealthy enough. Who knows?
yeah,
But that's interesting though. Like I was thinking about like different milestones in his immortality that he himself will be able to keep track of.
Sorry, I just wanted to like to add to the whole influencer bit. It's really interesting how he's able to like respond to almost every comment and like be on Twitter 24/7 and do all of these podcasts, because like I said before, it's just him, right? Like it's him and an assistant just like scrolling through so many comments and like media requests and things like that. I'm surprised how put together he is in the face of all of that attention, both positive and negative. It's pretty interesting because we see um, celebrities kind of come apart when faced with so much negative attention that they have like entire firms essentially protecting them. Like, for example, Chapel Roan had a pretty public breakdown because of all of the attention she was receiving on TikTok and stuff. And I think she made a mistake responding to the trolls and like to haters online, because the more she responded, the more attention she got, and it just got worse and worse until she was just like straight up crying on TikTok. It was a little weird to see. But yeah, I am very impressed that he has like the mental strength to like hold it together in the face of like what is a surprising amount of hate, right? Like a lot of people really dislike Bryan Johnson.
I will add two
Yeah.
things to this. First of all, his assistant is now the co-founder and CMO of Don't Die. So
Yo, good for her promotion. Get that bag,
yeah,
girl.
I mean, she is like, I mean, she was doing everything, I guess. So, and they probably have expanded the team as well. Like, I doubt like it's just both of them anymore, because there's a lot of stuff. Like, there's this thing called a network school, which is like a whole different rabbit hole. Which is there's this guy called Balaji Srinivasan. He wants to start his own countries and shit, and he's started this thing called the network school. It's in Malaysia. It's an island he's bought, and he has like
I mean,
don't die certified trainers there. Brian Johnson went there and like did a whole training thing, and they follow his whole routine there and everything. It's a whole thing. Like the Don't Die community movement, cult, whatever you want to call it, there's like a shit ton of meetings everywhere all over the world now. So it's grown to a very big size. Natalia.
I just wanted to say in the documentary, Bryan Johnson talks about how it is just him and
Yeah.
his then assistant, right? I don't know if he's expanded his PR team into like a full-fledged team once the documentary was like after the documentary was made, but as of I really want to say when was this documentary made? Like 2021?
What? No,
No,
dude.
no,
The
no.
documentary
As
is
of
the most
no,
recent.
fuck,
Dude, it
2024.
came
Oh
out
my
in
god.
Jan. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, but it
It was
was
shot
shot
probably around
in
2022,
2021.
2021.
Yeah, so like I guess as of shooting like 21, 22, it was just him and his assistant, like
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
what he
yeah.
says in the documentary, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm taking his word for it.
I mean, it's just impressive. As a media operation, it is very impressive.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He knows how to brand
It's
himself.
also
I mean, to
like
be fair,
the
he is an
topic itself
ex-entrepreneur.
is unique
So
enough that, like, it's gonna get attention, even if you do a bad job at it. There's that as well. Like, like some documentaries, the documentary itself is like nothing special, but the documentary is so interesting that we just watch it regardless of how it's shot. And this is one of those. I mean, the documentary itself is shot pretty well in this case, but like this is also one of those topics where you would watch it regardless of how the filmmaking around it is. So same with his media operation, where the topic itself is interesting enough that it will attract attention regardless.
that's true, but I also think he does a good job of promoting himself and responding and just building that brand around him. I think if he did it badly, people would have brushed it aside as rich man doing rich man things. But the fact that a lot of people haven't brushed it aside and people are still talking about it is a sign of him doing a good job.
All right, let's move on. Okay, so Ham has raised his hands. Let's not move on, I guess. Um,
just a little bit. I mean, what Nats was saying is that like he's good at it. I This is just my opinion. I'm just saying. I think it's like it's a different interface, right? Like you know how streamers will refer to their audience as just like a chat. Like it's in their head, it's like one thing that's made up of all these different little voices. That from his perspective might sort of be a very long term friend, right? Like a lot of his human relations are probably going to fade away because of death, like, but this, the way he's interfacing with his audience, for him it's always going to be like a constant audience, right? Like he's obviously going to know that it's like a ship of Theseus sort of thing where it's different parts of it coming in and out, but for him it's like one person, because like if someone watches Bryan Johnson content 200 years from now, they can start like binge watch from 2016 or 2017, whatever it is. Like they can catch up with his entire relationship with the chat. It's like an interesting thing. I don't know.
yeah, it's like a crazy
Some
thought,
parts of
actually.
his life, yeah, like some parts of his life, it's just like a rabbit hole of thinking, like something you wouldn't have even considered. So in that sense, it's like a very interesting documentary. Like it really opens up rabbit holes.
I mean, he also doesn't want his audience to die either. That's the whole point of doing it. He's telling everybody not to die. Okay, okay, okay. Let's move on to what I think is another interesting topic of discussion, which is Blueprint. Blueprint is his company basically, which sells all the supplements. So what he sells is this thing called a blueprint stack, which is everything he does. He's made it into a sort of easy to digest, easy to do formulation. And he said he only did it because a lot of people were asking him to make the thing easy to consume. So he developed the protocol, and now he's selling that. The prices, they seem steep to us because we are in India and we get a currency hit. But apart from that, if you look at it compared to like other premium supplement prices, it's very comparable. I think the whole stack, if you take, costs like $300-400 per month, which covers everything, which is very expensive to be honest for most people, even in America. But I think like the Silicon Valley audience that would be interested in this, I don't think it's that expensive for them, and prices go down if you scale. So that's just capitalism. I would like your opinions on this, on his blueprint thing. Let's start with Natalia.
Uh, I think this feeds back to what we were talking about earlier. It's not scientific according to me because it's him testing a lot of stuff on himself, and like what works for him may not necessarily work for you. So I think this is, like Shantanu said, where it becomes a little questionable, where he's selling his supplements for you to then try on yourself, which is not ideal because, like, you don't know how it will positively or negatively affect you to take all of those supplements to like follow the full regime. And this was mentioned in the documentary as well. When he first started marketing his products, a lot of people were immediately like, yes, shill, obviously you have been doing this don't die thing to then sell it, this is just another product, which I don't really agree with. This very clearly wasn't the case. Like, he is not just doing this to sell shit, he's doing this because he believes in it, and he does need to like continue to fund this. And if there's a way to share what he's doing and make some money out of it to keep the thing going, then that's a very natural progression. I don't think he's doing this as a money making scheme. But yeah, I don't agree with like the whole 400 pounds a month supplement thing because God knows what's in that man. But the blueprint does sell a lot more than that. I think you can also buy protein powder and singular supplements and clean extra virgin olive oil, which is really funny because he sells that extra virgin olive oil for 37 pounds for a bottle.
It's called
Criminal
snake
stuff,
oil.
bro. Criminal stuff. Yeah, because a lot of people called it snake oil and he leaned into the joke. Good marketing though. Like, props to him for that. What I do appreciate with the blueprint is he does have a lot of free resources, like the stages that he goes through and the levels that he's been through, and a lot of knowledge is available for free, so you can then take that knowledge and implement it in your own life to the best of your ability, which is nice. Like, he hasn't put paywalls behind what he's learned.
That's actually a very good point. That tells you his like motive is not
Yeah,
like completely profit making.
I don't think his motives are financial because there are better ways of making money.
Yeah,
He also knows that there are better ways of
dude.
making money.
Next, let's go to Soham.
Nats made a really good point in that he hasn't paywalled any of his actual findings. Uh, Even in the documentary, when it got to the part where he sort of launched his own line of items, I was not aware of this at all before I watched the documentary, but I did feel like, this was bound to happen at some point. Like, he's going to come up with his own sort of product. But like Nats pointed out a very good thing in that there's a lot of life guru sort of lessons out there now where it's basically people who you watch all the time anyway, and then they somehow have access to like some secret knowledge that they can give to you on a monthly subscription, not even like a one time fee. And seems that seems like a cash grab right away. Whether it's like Andrew Tate's whole, I don't even know what it's called. Is it Hustler University or something?
Escape the Matrix University.
Okay, whatever. That seems like a very obvious cash grab. Here, the olive oil thing, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that was the first time I heard the name. I remember when people were tweeting about the cost of his olive oil. It makes sense that he would also try to probably make like a little bit of money. Like, it's not going to be the same price as other source of olive oil, but this was definitely not a money venture going in. He definitely saw an opportunity where, because he very well could have made like blueprint like a paywall content where all his vitals and stuff is you have to be like a subscriber or something to access that. And the fact that he didn't go that route after he already had an audience shows a little bit about him as a person as to how he wants to treat his audience, which in today's age, like we see creators sort of abuse that relationship way too often. And I think this was sort of a green flag in like that whole documentary. There were a lot of other red flags, but like this was a good, it sort of warmed my heart to see that.
Hmm. All right. Next, Hamad.
So, Blueprint is pretty cool and all. It's just that the things are very, very unaffordable, especially the blood work, which costs around $25,000 to $50,000. That's very steep. I think it's for microplastics, and the other one is for aging. But even the supplements are very, very expensive, like $50 minimum. But yeah, the good thing is about the information, but the same thing, it's so unaffordable. All of it is so unaffordable, except for the food. Like he's very like you can get that blueprint protocol delivered fresh thing. I think you can just look at the food and you can literally just eat it yourself.
Just one thing, sorry. The prices you said are like very off. So I just wanted to like correct that. The microplastics test is like
It says 20
135.
between 25,000 to $50,000.
I mean, on his
Yeah,
website it
dude.
says $135, like $135.
Wait, what are you looking at?
His
Because I'm
blueprint website where he's selling the thing.
Yeah, but check out the speed of aging and microplastics test.
Yeah, it's like $325.
You might be looking at INR values, maybe.
No, no, no. I know what I did wrong. It says it's that thing is better than something which cost $25,000 to fifty
Oh
thousand dollars. I'm
lol.
checking it again right now. Okay, okay, my bad, my bad, my bad.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my bad. Glad Shandu pointed it out. I think some dyslexia is kicking in, bro. Okay, I'll talk about that later. I've been reading things wrong this week quite a bit, but yes. So he says it's better. Okay, so that's not that bad. $135. That's what a blood like. That's what blood work costs in India. Yeah, if you think about it like that. So okay, I was misinformed on that. But still, the products are still very expensive. Like $50
The
for
products are definitely expensive.
the longevity mix. Yeah, so that's what I would say. That's all I have to say about it. But then it's looks very cool, the website.
Yeah. So I'll just conclude this with saying like one of the arguments that he's made many times about the price of his products is that the supply chain is very dirty, and one of the things he's trying to do is like he tests all his things and to find suppliers that make stuff without a lot of heavy metals in them that come from food processing is very difficult. I don't know how much I buy that, but obviously that's very testable. I'm not going to go and test it, like, but I'm 100% sure someone will at some point go and test how much like heavy metals his products have. Our final point of discussion today is this don't die community. So basically, he has this community, he has an app, he's experimenting with it a lot. 'Cause from what I understand, in that network school, he has certified trainers that are certified in the don't die way of training. So maybe that is a thing that's coming. He's trying to launch a food testing program where you get food that's don't die certified, so you know it's going to be healthy for you, stuff like that. So I just wanted to know your guys' opinion on this don't his community that he's growing. Let's start with Natalia.
I think we did talk about um like at least we touched on like the cult like aspect of the community and of like the following that he's building. However, unlike most other cults out there, what he's preaching is being healthy. So, like if it works, it works. I think the community he's building is a net good thing because, like I said earlier, like a lot of the events that they organize all over the world are around like hikes and runs and like healthy things. I think what he's preaching is to just like try and live a better, healthier life, which for a lot of us is like something we need, right? Personally speaking, I know I could be healthier. I could have a healthier diet. I could sleep better. I have a desk job, so my lifestyle is pretty sedentary. So I could move more. So yeah, I think the community itself is like trying to do a good thing.
Okay, what about you, Soham?
Yeah, I mean, what Nat said does make sense. It still does seem a little dangerous to be like in the cult, I feel, because you don't want to be too easily believing of one particular leader in that sense. Like, this is a field, right? Longevity. Maybe you don't want to be part of one particular community, and you sort of want to sample other people's advice as well. I watched this because the documentary is new. There is like a bunch of stuff about it on YouTube right now. I guess other people are also thinking about getting ahead of the algorithm. So I saw this one channel which it's two doctors. One is a sort of, he's young, but he's also probably in his 40s. But then there is another doctor who's like visibly older than this guy, and you can tell that they have sort of a generational gap between them. And when they were reacting to this documentary, one very important point that he had to make was the specific genetic makeup and the history of health in his family, in Brian Johnson's family, up to Brian Johnson. It also has an effect on what will work and what won't. So for other people to take a lot of his advice is not as viable. Like, that was just one thing that he had to say as a doctor. Like, this other guy was more critical of him, but the younger guy was like, he's probably doing something that's going to help us in increasing our average lifespan as well. But as just one person, you probably shouldn't think of what is working for him to be as beneficial for you, because we just don't know. There's no way of us for us to find out. And we also, because you can't test its positive impact, you also can't test if it will have a negative effect. So that was just like a disclaimer that he wanted to put out, which made sense to me. I mean, yeah, we should probably be sampling advice from different longevity gurus.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. So, Hamad, what about you?
I'm gonna keep this also very short, but I think it's probably the best thing out of this, because I know the fears about being culty and all, but I really worry about the health of Americans, because they are the richest nation in the world, which has the most unhealthiest people. And it's very concerning the amount of obesity they have there, and sadly they have exported this nonsense to this country as well. So I'm all for it. That was one of the things I really liked about even that blueprint website. There's like a lot of information there. So I love that it's very open about its messaging, and the community, yeah, I also see it as a net good. And also, like, stop exporting obesity to the world, America.
I agree. Yeah, as for me, I think getting people to be healthier is just a good thing in general. And he introduces an interesting perspective and way of doing it. And that's well and good. There's a lot of health advice out there. If this is one of the guys you listen to in a menu of other people, that's probably a good thing. Okay, we'll wrap this up with one last question, which we ask after every documentary, which is how did this documentary change our perspectives? So let's start with Hamad first. Hamad, what do you think?
Uh, I I have started to think about immortality in a very different way. I didn't know somebody could go this extreme to live long, which got me thinking into a much deeper thing about, like, for sure, what Brian Johnson is doing. Maybe he's the first rich guy to be really public about this, because I have heard of the elite always trying their best to live longer lives throughout history. Yeah, it just gave me a look into how the wealthiest can try and preserve their health in a way. and it exposed me to a whole new rebellion against nature. So that's how it changed my perspective.
All right. Soham, what about you?
Okay, I wasn't really aware of like longevity as an interest. So this was a good peek into that world. It didn't change my perspective, I think this is good about other documentaries as well, but like it has opened up my mind to think about things that I probably by myself would not have ever really thought about. So I think for this question, my perspective will probably change. At least now, I will have a little bit more context about Bryan Johnson whenever he pops back up in the news for whatever reason next time. And this context will be good to like have an opinion on whatever happens next. I do believe he will outlive the four of us. So it'll be interesting.
Definitely me.
He's not outliving me.
Let's see who has the last laugh.
Literally.
Yeah, let's see who has a last laugh.
Whoever wins will have like a very lonely victory, is all I'm saying.
I do want to see. I mean, how long do you think he will live then, Hamad? I did want to like bet on this because there's like four people over here.
How old is he right now?
51, no?
50, yeah, 50s, I think.
Damn, he is a very good 51.
Hey, dude, have you seen his jawline? It's crazier than mine, bro. It's a better jawline than most of us here.
Okay, how many of you think he will make it to 100? Let's start there at least.
I think he'll make it to 120.
I think he'll make it to 100.
100 easy.
Bro, so you think you're going to live more than 120, Hamad?
I don't have to live up to 120, na. I have a good 24, 25 years on him.
Yeah, yeah.
So you think you'll live to 100?
95.
You're saying 95 for
Yeah.
yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
You have a history of people who have long lives in your family, Hamad?
Yeah, dude. People have crossed 90. Like,
I mean, my grandmother was over 90, but yeah.
it's okay. They got dementia and all, but they lived.
They have dementia, but they live. That's not a fun way to live, bro.
I know it's not good. Dude, life is not always like the neurological thing. Like, my grandfather was smoking cigarettes by like till 91. Okay.
I mean, how are his lungs? But that is also what Brian Johnson is fighting, right? He's fighting aging. So is he going to live as like a vegetable at 120, or is he going to be like a mobile man with all of his cognitive faculties at 120?
Dude, okay, if he becomes immortal in the sense that that woman from Doctor Who who's supposed to be like the last human being like is just a piece of stretched out skin, no organs, nothing. Like, I don't think that is immortality.
I don't think he's chasing that either.
I don't think he's aiming for that. I think he's aiming to be like a fit man.
No, I think he'll be walking at 100 and shit, dude.
Yeah, no, that's what like that's why I was interested.
Oh, what I meant was
Yeah, that's the impressive thing. Will you be walking at 100, Hamad?
both my grandparents were walking nicely even post 90. So, like, physically, the decline is not at all bad in my lineage, but the mental decline is very bad. I'll not lie about it. Like, it's quite bad.
Okay.
But physically, no. Like,
Yeah.
walking, eating properly, eating solid food, that too. Like, my
That's
granddad was like eating
mhm.
beef at 90 and shit, dude.
That's very impressive, dude. Not bad.
I'll tell you the craziest part, Natalia. He was going for
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
Fajr in the morning, and a truck actually hit him, and that's how he passed away. He was going to Fajr at that age,
Oh,
bro, in the
fuck.
morning, going to the mosque.
Who's going to Fajr at that age?
So it was not
Damn,
like he
dude.
was like,
I can't believe this is possible.
yeah, dude,
Yeah,
rest
yeah,
in
yeah,
peace. That's
yeah.
how he passed away in Madrai. Hmm. Very far away from
Damn.
home. Also, another topic for another day. But what I mean to say is, but the
Yeah.
mental decline was really bad. Depression is very common.
Mhm, mhm.
I actually think Brian Johnson will
Outlive all of us. We'll see, bro.
no, no, I think he will outlive us, but I think he will be the cause of his own death. Like at some point, he will give up.
Bro, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Oh, you think at some point his discipline will end? Oh, that's interesting,
Not
dude.
his discipline,
nah, nah,
dude.
nah.
I think he will opt for death. Like, this is not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're like
Mm.
1,000 years old, don't you get bored after a while of just like,
Yeah, dude, that's what I was thinking. Like,
I think we didn't address that only. We didn't address that point only. What do you do being alive for so long?
No, but I mean, in terms of the boredom aspect, I think for him, he will be like, there are enough exciting things to do in life, and technology will move, and humanity will progress, that you will not be bored. I think is an argument that he can make.
All right,
I
Nida,
my argument was not really about boredom. My thing was, okay, what's the planet going to be like in 50 years, dude? Fuck 100 years. What?
That's where the Jeff Bezos space race comes in, bro. You get on Jeff Bezos rocket, you fuck up.
So, you don't even need to worry about the next 50 years, bro. The next 10 years are going to be hell.
No, like his influencer part of like his life. I wonder how much he needs an audience. Like the fact that he is being observed. I mean, he's putting out all this vital data about himself. What role does the audience really keep in hold in his quest for immortality? Like, would he still be chasing immortality if there was literally no one watching? Like going back to Rodchenkov, in Icarus, like how much is the observer integral to this whole operation?
I think it's pretty integral because he doesn't have a strong social network to rely on. And so he has to rely on this community that he's built, which ties into like me thinking of this as as a narcissistic endeavor. I think the community and the online following plays a really big role in like for him.
all right, Natalia, how did this documentary change your perspective?
Lamau. Okay, yeah, let's come back to that question. Have similar feelings as Soham on this in terms of like I think the documentary really opened my mind to like Bryan Johnson and his deeper thoughts and like his actual philosophy because before this all I knew of Bryan Johnson were like random headlines that would pop up and um, videos that Shantanu would make me watch.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you, Natalia. The representation of him in traditional media is very different from what you see in the documentary. All right, I think we're gonna call it a day today. This was a very long recording. If you made it all the way through, thank you for listening. If you find any of it interesting, you can write to us at escapeintoreality@gmail.com. Catch you next time. Bye.